Hi, Karen Sharice here with Eric Miller of Finance of America.
Hi.
To talk about the lending process. Everyone wants to go and look at property without getting pre-approved. They want to wait until they find the right home before they start that process.
Right.
Good idea, bad idea?
Well, I understand why folks would want to see property before they make the commitment, but market factors require that sellers want to see that you've been vetted before you submit an offer on a property. From a practical perspective, you also want to know that this is a property that you can afford.
Right.
You also want to know that if there are any things that might prevent you from safely purchasing a house, those things would come up during the pre-approval process. So things like a credit derogatory that you weren't aware of, right? Or perhaps you have less income for qualifying than you might have thought about, or you don't really know what the payment structure is. Those things will come up during the pre-approval process so that you can make the right decision when you find the right house.
And sometimes it's hard when people are just online shopping and dreaming, and then like we say, how about reality? So sometimes it's hard for them to understand that like you have to know for sure your buying power. Otherwise,
Sure.
it's just
with
a dream, right?
With our team, we try to help folks establish a price range.
Right.
And so that price range equals anything that you can qualify to, your ceiling, but also working backward to figure out where you're comfortable. So a truly educated borrower is going to kind of know if they find a house, what it's going to cost them, can they afford it before they decide if they want to move forward.
So tell us a little bit about like the lending process, like from the very, very initial, from the very beginning, the
Sure.
initial call.
Okay.
And how long is an initial call? Because sometimes when we tell people like you need to get pre-approved, like they are hesitant, feeling like it's going to be like a 2-week process.
Right. So my initial consultation, I try to keep it to about 20 minutes. Okay. And during the process, we're gonna evaluate you for 3 criteria. The 3 criteria are credit, income, and assets. That's really all we're looking at. So your credit equals your FICO scores, but also the things that you owe and you make payments on monthly. Things like car payments or student loans or credit card payments. Okay. Your income is the crucial piece because that's the hardest one to change in a short period of time. Your income is what you do for a living, how you get paid, whether you're a salaried employee or whether you're a self-employed borrower. There are different criteria for evaluating income, and your income's crucial because you can only qualify to a percentage of your income for payment purposes. The third thing is assets, and that's money that you have for down payment. Of course, there are closing costs, there are things that you have to have money for, and we have to understand where the money's coming from if you're going to purchase. So, a quick consultation would be about 20 minutes where I would basically touch on those 3 items, and that would help me understand what documentation I might need if you're going to move forward to pre-qualify, followed by an email out to you with a link so that you can provide your application and documentation. And then typically within 1 or 2 days from receipt of that, we're going to schedule another call where I'm going to go over your findings. And then we can run scenarios, you can identify what your goal payment is, how much money you have to put together, and then translate that into a purchase. Right, so you understand, okay, if I'm gonna buy a property for $600,000 and I have this much money to put down, how much is it gonna cost me and what should I expect to happen next?
And those uploading of documents is on a secure link. They don't actually have to come into the office to see you if they don't want to.
Correct.
Everything is secure online, super easy.
Correct. Almost nobody comes into the office anymore.
Yeah.
And that we don't see any of those documentations. I think sometimes there's a crossover just because we're referring, like we don't see any of those documents. Those are all private and
That's
personal.
correct.
Yeah.
That's correct. So if you work with us, you're going to upload your docs to a secure server. It's all remote. You don't have to email or fax anything to me directly. We pull it from the server, and then I have access to it via that system. That's also where you're going to put your application. And then for future reference, if you add additional documentation later, you're also going to supply it to that server. So we have access to it, but you don't have to actually go through the process of transmitting anything via internet, which is good.
Yeah.
I think another one that we get a lot is they don't want a ding on their credit score. When you run their credit, how big of a ding is that, and should that be a concern to them?
This is a great question. It's something that comes up almost every time I have a borrower application.
Right.
So people have been coached to believe that any inquiry is a negative impact on their credit. It's not actually true, okay? If you have lots of inquiries, then you're going to have a negative impact because credit inquiries are one of the data points that determines your credit score, okay? So typically, if I'm the first person to pull credit, your first inquiry doesn't hurt you at all. There's no negative impact, all right? If you have multiple inquiries, for example, you go to Target and get a credit card at Target, and then you go buy a car and you get financed for a car, and then the next week you come into me and I pull your credit, that third inquiry, well, there might be a negative impact to your score. The approximate impact is like 4 to 5 points. Okay, so if you're shopping for a mortgage, understand that the optimal FICO tier is 740 and higher. So if you're 805 and you drop to 799, there's no impact as far as your ability to qualify. If you're 674 and you drop to 668, there's no negative impact to your ability to qualify. You do want to be mindful of credit inquiries, right? Because it is a sort of a marker for how responsible you are as far as how much you borrow. But that first, even the second inquiry is not going to have a negative impact.
It's super good to know.
I get asked
I
almost.
didn't realize it was such a small
I
ding.
didn't know what the number was either.
Well, it's actually not a ding the first time.
Yeah.
And a lot of times when
So the number 2.
it's the third inquiry in the over 120-day period.
Okay.
Okay, but so usually what happens where folks get this misunderstanding is somebody pulls their credit and then a month or so goes by and then the next person pulls their credit and the scores are lower. But the data has changed because your creditors report every month.
Every month, yeah.
And so your balances might be different. You might have new credit lines that you didn't have in the prior one. And the assumption is that the lower score reflects the fact that you had another inquiry because they weren't late. But on-time payments is only one part of the measure of credit, which is a whole separate conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Based on your income, is there like a certain amount that you should be paying per month to look at what your mortgage should be?
Great question. So I think there's a difference between people's comfort level and the ability to qualify. Okay, so your sort of absolute thresholds, meaning the max you can qualify for is typically somewhere between 40 and 50% of your income. So 40 to 50% of your gross income, you can qualify for a mortgage payment. I think the comfort level that most people express to me is around 30 to 33%. So roughly a third of your gross income is a pretty safe starting point, but it also depends on if you carry a lot of debt. If you have a lot of student loans, if you have a car collection, if you are revolving a lot of credit card debt, then your threshold might change. But your absolute ceiling for qualifying is usually somewhere around 45% of your income. So if you make $10,000 a month, your cap for eligibility is about $4,500.